among all the live-action remakes that we've received from Disney thus far, this is the one that could have really used it. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to discuss the most recent Disney live-action remake, Mulan, which came out in 2020. So if you've heard of this movie online, you've probably heard of a lot of the backlash that it's gotten, either by the film's messages, its tropes, or even some of the controversies behind the production, which we'll get to in a second. And as for my first impressions, it's not as bad as some people say. But to be fair, there are some big flaws to it. Alright, so for those of you who don't know, this is a remake of the 1998 2D animation of Mulan, which is an adaptation of the very old and famous Chinese ballad of Fa Mulan. The plot from the 2D movie is generally the same. We have an enemy from the north that's trying to invade on China and trying to attack the emperor, played by Jet Li, and so the empire is going out and drafting one male from each family. And that's where we meet our main character, Hua Mulan, played by Yifei Liu, which Hua versus Fa, which the story there is that there are different interpretations as to what her last name was in the original ballad, but apparently Hua is a little more accurate to some of the adaptations. Mulan is a very talented young woman who seems to have impeccable martial arts ability and agility, almost supernaturally, and when the Empire comes to draft for their family, the only male in her family is her father, played by Zima. And of course Mulan, being somewhat of a tomboy who's not very good at the whole matchmaking, trying to be the perfect wife or the perfect daughter, decides that she's going to steal her father's armor and sword and go under the guise as a man in order to enter the army in his stead. And of course along the way she'll meet some comrades and of course be up against the main enemy, which instead of the Mongols are now led by a man named Bori, played by Jason Scott Lee. And he's accompanied by a woman with supernatural abilities named Shen Yang, played by Gong Li, who is classified by most people as a witch. And the only guidance that she has is her family's guiding spirit, which is a phoenix. Which again is a change from the original 2D film, but is not a bad change. And of course we know where the story's going to go on from here. Mulan is going to fight. She's going to fight Bori. She's going to even go up against the witch. She's going to be revealed for being a woman. But despite that fact, she's still going to go and save the day and save the emperor. So some of the major differences from the 2D film is that we no longer have the same side characters. Instead of Eddie Murphy's Mushu, we now have this phoenix spirit, which, I mean, both are creative liberties from the original source material, so it doesn't really matter to me which one we go with. The only problem is I feel like the phoenix doesn't really serve a purpose, other than to show her the way once, as well as just to basically be a very obvious symbol of her rising to the occasion. You also notice that all of the songs from the original film have been cut out. They are referenced through melodies throughout the film, but other than that, we don't have any of the same whimsy from the 2D animation. There are details in this film that seem kind of silly to begin with, that I can't help but feel like, why not just make it a full-blown kids movie and add the music? I mean, honestly though, that's partly what makes these Disney movies, is the music. So I'm on that side of the fence that says they should have used the music and tried to bring us this Asian culture with the Disney treatment of having musical numbers, having some whimsy, just overall having a lot of fun along the way. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the good things in this film. So first of all, it's a very visually pleasing film. There are some great sets, there's a lot of color, there's even some great landscape shots. I don't really know what this yellow stuff is here, but I guess that looks cool too. There's a lot of great martial arts choreography, and that's a lot of fun to watch. And despite the fact that this is a more serious, sort of dramatic version of the 2D animation, there's still some humor sprinkled throughout, especially with Mulan's comrades. So in the original film, we had Captain Li Shang, who was basically the love interest for Mulan, but he was cut out of this film because he was supposed to basically be a love interest again. But apparently he's become sort of an LGBTQ icon since then, being recognized as bisexual for his interest in Mulan's alter ego, Ping. So because of this controversy, they had to write out Li Shang and write in a new character, Hong Hui, played by Yusan An. We also put that leadership role into a new character, Commander Teng, played by Donnie Yen, which, let's face it, if you've seen enough Donnie Yen movies, you're just going to refer to him as Commander Donnie Yen, which he usually wears that very stoic face, and he's no different here, but we get to see a lot of his martial art abilities in action, which is always fun to watch. On the flip side, it's awesome to see Jet Li as the Emperor. Unfortunately though, we don't get to see him being Jet Li, doing any of his martial arts. He barely does any of those actions. And for some reason, I don't think it's just me, but he sounds like his own dubbed voice actor. Yeah, it sounds like he's ADRing over his own voice. So one major point to take away from the film is that there is a very clear feminist message being pushed here. And in today's age, especially with the Me Too movement, it makes a lot of sense to do that. But on one hand, whereas you see Mulan in the original 2D film actually working really hard to actually be able to perform like the other men and having to use her wits in order to excel and actually save other people's lives, in this film, they go with this sort of chosen one trope where she was born special with certain superpowers. It's not really 100% clear what they are, they just refer to it as chi. The idea is that she has some kind of inner strength that she can utilize that basically makes her perform really well and basically kick ass whenever she wants. So the film becomes less of her struggling to actually be like the other men that she's fighting with. It becomes more of her accepting who she really is on the inside and being free of society's weights on her. Which sounds a lot like another movie.
Let it go, can't hold it back anymore.
Now, don't get me wrong, I love Frozen. I think there's a great message in Frozen within that context. But in this case, though, we have a very different story about a woman who's supposed to work hard in order to become the leader that she's meant to be. Instead, she's just sort of born into it. So I can't help but feel like the message I take away from this film is, yep, ladies, I'm sorry, but unless you were born with superpowers, you don't have a chance to fight in a man's world. Now, some of you might be thinking I'm overreaching with that message there, but think about it though. If you're the underdog and all you have to do is just accept who you are, that's a really weak message. So at least personally for me, that whole feminist message is severely skewed. But unfortunately, we have so many other factors that are really trying to hammer the nail on the head here. So we have Xian Yang, the witch, who is there really just to propel Mulan's leadership forward. She's there merely to show how awful it is to be a woman in a man's world, even with her superpowers, and she's there to bask in Mulan's glory and awe, to say, wow, you did what I couldn't. It's worthy of me sacrificing myself to you. And I'm sitting there thinking, so you have no character, you're there merely to propel Mulan ahead of you. Okay, we really didn't need a witch, we could have just had like we did in the original 2D film. Somehow the cartoon is more adult in portraying its themes. So when it comes to the villain, Bori Khan, I mean, he's a slight improvement from the original villain, but that's not really saying much. But when it comes to revealing her as a woman though, the one thing that really bugged me is that everyone was so quick to accepting her as leading an army of men. Now, on one hand, in the original film, they kind of did that too, but it was only a few characters who really accepted her, mostly her close comrades, even though they never really admitted to saying, oh, you're a woman and that's okay, because honestly, in this setting, with this context, I don't see men really admitting that. Not saying that's something that should be that way, but I'm just saying that's a lot of acceptance to expect out of these characters. Like, let's face it, this is not 21st century America, this is ancient China. It's vastly different. And I think it's the fact, too, that it's early on in the film that they really dig it in that, hey, if you associate with a woman, you die. If you lie about yourself, you die. So the fact that the film is so quick to accept her later on kind of contradicts itself. Yeah, so I kind of blame the movie for making that suspension of disbelief all the more unbelievable. And oh god, let's talk about chi. So, personal story. When I was really young, I was part of a martial arts school, and the word chi got thrown around a lot. The idea behind chi is that it's basically like energy. It's a life force. It exists in everything and everywhere, the rocks, the trees, people. The way you extended yourself out through breath and consciousness was sort of your way of sort of achieving some level of spirituality. And then it was years later that I watched Star Wars for the first time, and when I saw them using the Force, I thought, oh, it's like chi, but with superpowers. Cool. So when they're talking about chi in this movie, I'm thinking, oh, so it's just a superpower, nothing to do really with energy or anything like that. How is a film with an all-Asian cast, with Asian characters and an Asian setting, get their own concepts so wrong? With some research, I come to find out there were 4 writers to the screenplay, none of which were Asian. And it really shows. And I know one of the controversies of the film was that the crew was vastly white. Which, I mean, to be fair, it is an American production, so I kind of see that being a thing. And I mean, they also shot primarily in New Zealand and only a little bit in China, which one of the other controversies was that some of the parts they shot in China was in Xinjiang, which, unfortunately, there were some political issues going on, as well as some internment camps. So when the film thanks the region in the credits, it didn't look very good for Disney's image. And another controversy was that the actress from Mulan, Li Fei-liu, was making some comments about supporting the Hong Kong police during another political thing going on, so that didn't go well over social media. This is where I hate to dislike this film, because as a personal bias, I love East Asian culture, especially Chinese culture, and I'd love to see more Asian representation. But unfortunately, there's just so many negative aspects I have a hard time overlooking. I mean, the witch character to me was sort of this blunt plot device. The concept of Chi was ridiculous, which led into a chosen one type trope that was completely unneeded, which in turn skews the feminist message, and has people accepting her way too easily, especially for what the film sets up. There's unnecessary narrations that basically serve as exposition dumps. The Phoenix really doesn't do anything. There's even some scenes of a young Mulan that don't really add anything other than the trope that she's born special. And the thing is, I know a lot of critics are actually admiring this film, mostly for its visuals. Now, I grew up with a lot of martial art epics, so if you want to see visual feasts of the eyes as well as really good storytelling and characters, check out some of these films. These are beautiful films with great martial arts and epic scales, shots. These are amazing films. But the other point I want to make is that I feel like when kids watch this, they're not going to really see some of the flaws. All they're going to see is an empowered young woman, rising to the occasion. And that in itself is a positive. So I do feel like it's still a good movie for kids, maybe a little too serious, but there's a positive visual message there for them. So I know I've been harping on this film a lot, which unfortunately, there's a lot of reason to. But with all that said, the 2020 live-action adaptation of Mulan gets my score of 2.5 stars. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Have you all seen Mulan? And if not, what else have you been watching lately? Comment below, let me know, and of course stay tuned right here if y'all want to see more.